Omaha kid, Husker football player, Vietnam vet, journalist, PR crisis communication expert, banker. This is a conversation with Paul Critchlow. I'm Jeremy Lipschultz, UNO School of Communication professor and director. Mr. Critchlow is Vice President of Global Markets for Bank of America Merrill Lynch. He returned to Omaha to receive the UNO School of Communication 2012 Lifetime Achievement Award. Mr. Critchlow, welcome back to Omaha.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Benson High School produced many successful graduates. Why do you think that happened? What was it about Benson that was a great place to start?
Well, Benson High School, first of all, we were known as the Bunnies, and so we immediately had an obstacle to overcome because people like to make fun of the name of our mascot. But seriously, it was a fabulous education. It was a relatively diverse student body. There were great teachers, and it was a place where values were taught that I think have stood me in good stead ever since.
What was Omaha like in those days, first growing up and then going to high school?
Well, you know, I feel like I had kind of an idyllic upbringing. My father was a carpet layer. My mother worked at Boys Town as a clerk for many years. I had a brother and a sister, and we lived in the Benson area. And I remember just running from yard to yard and having a great time as a child. And I remember then going to Monroe Junior High, which was also a very fine junior high at that time, we called them. And it was a pleasant childhood.
So you graduated from high school as a football star and signed to play at Nebraska as a fullback, right?
Correct, yes. And I had a full year, a full scholarship to play football there.
And what happened?
I really enjoyed playing football in Nebraska. It was the big time. I did reasonably well and made good progress, and then in my third year I broke my leg. And Jeremy, I have to say that I became demoralized and could not recover mentally. I could recover physically from that development, but I had a really hard time recovering mentally from it, and kind of lost my steam and enthusiasm for the game. Kind of struggled through a fourth year and actually had a fifth year of eligibility remaining, but decided that I needed a change of scenery, if you will, and so I basically volunteered for the Army.
And what went through your mind as you made that decision? These are the Vietnam years. They were difficult years in the country. It
was a very difficult time for the country. I think at Nebraska University on the campus there was not quite the degree of anti-war protest that there was elsewhere. I felt like the Army might provide me with not only a change of venue, but a structure and a discipline that would be helpful to me at the time. I also kind of had a sense, I was an English major at that time, I had a sense that Vietnam was going to be the defining experience of my generation, and I was aware of the alternatives, avoiding the draft, going to Canada, and various other possible ways of getting out of the draft, but decided that I would rather be in the action rather than than the outside of it, and that's what motivated me to go.
You were in the action, and it was a life-changing experience. What happened?
Well, it was, Jeremy, I was trained as a artilleryman, and then was invited to go to a school called Pathfinder School, and became a paratrooper and had a lot of special training. And when I got to Vietnam, I actually was assigned as a reconnaissance sergeant attached to an infantry company, and we saw a lot of action there for 6 months, and at the 6-month point I was involved in a very major battle, the Battle of Hue, near the village of Hep Duc, where my company was one of two surrounded by a force of several thousand North Vietnamese Army regulars. And in that battle, I was wounded and medevaced.
And you not only received the Bronze Star for Valor and the Purple Heart, but you also saw journalism in action.
Jeremy, that's a really that's a major turning point for me. In the battle in which I was wounded, in the afternoon, an Associated Press photographer named Oliver Noonan was shot down in a helicopter coming out to the site of the battle. The helicopter was shot down, and it was not only Oliver Noonan, but 8 other American soldiers. Was shot down by a rocket-propelled grenade about 500 meters from my position. And so the object of the battle shifted to be coming to try to get to the helicopter to recover any survivors. Of course, there were no survivors, but later that night, I was wounded by a rocket-propelled grenade myself, medevaced the next morning, and spent several months in hospitals. During that period, I was able to read about the battle and knew about Oliver Noonan having died, and it caused me to think about why a civilian would risk his life, for his job, and that's what triggered my interest in journalism.
And you returned to Omaha at that point.
I returned to Omaha. I decided that I would switch my major to journalism. I re-enrolled at the University of Nebraska at Omaha. I didn't have any great desire to return to UNL, and got into the School of Journalism here, and had some absolutely fabulous teachers, and was highly motivated this time around, and did very well, and found that it was a field that I loved. And so in many ways I'm actually grateful to the experiences that I had in Vietnam, because they inspired me to a passion that operates within me today.
This was a journalism department at the time that had Warren Franke and Joe McCartney and Hugh Cowden and others. What was the feeling as a student in those days?
I think that's a great question. You have to go back and remember that it was a time of, we're talking 1971, and there was still a somewhat hostile reception to returning Vietnam veterans. I was surprised to find that many of my friends avoided me, and some of that was out of guilt, and some of it was out of the stereotypes that Vietnam combat veterans, might be a little crazy. Thank God that's not the case today with our returning troops. But the school was so welcoming, I think because they had a military bootstrapper program with military people attending the school. It was so welcoming to me, and those 3 teachers as well as others were incredibly welcoming to me. And I feel like they gave me special attention, and not that I needed it, but it was nice to have it. And it was just an enormously positive experience that set me on the rest of the path of my life. So.
Did you initially write for the Gateway, or did you intern at the World Herald right away?
I never wrote for the Gateway. I ended up I took such a heavy course load because I had so much to make up for, that I really, I worked actually for 9 months part-time for a bank in their internal communications, which was a great experience. U.S. National Bank, it was called back then. And then in the summer I was able to get an internship with the World Herald, and that too was an incredibly positive experience. I was able to go out and report on some fairly major stories, and they gave me a byline. They gave me some bylines, so I began to develop that feeling of motivation.
Is there a story or two that would have been the highlights for you?
We had during that summer shall we say, civil disturbance by a lot of young people, which I think kind of flowed from the whole Vietnam era. But the city attempted to place a curfew on Memorial Park, which of course is right across from the campus. And many students not students, I don't know if they were students, many young people decided not to obey that curfew, and it led to quite a confrontation between the city police and the young people who were protesting, and there was violence involved, and I was able to play a role as one of the few reporters on the scene, to cover that and document it, and that was kind of an exciting introduction to covering things that are actually happening.
Graduate school took you to New York and Columbia University. You were the first Vietnam vet to graduate from that celebrated journalism master's program and on to the Philadelphia Inquirer, correct?
Correct, yes. Let me just contrast quickly going to Columbia's campus in the anti-war days versus coming to UNO's campus. The night that I arrived for my very first orientation session at Columbia in New York, there was an anti-war protest involving the students. I had to walk through a crowd of a couple thousand students chanting anti-war protests, and so I was very anxious about that, and basically didn't tell anyone I was a Vietnam veteran for most of my entire year there. However, it turned out to be a very good experience academically, and from that experience, I knew that I wanted to specialize in print newspapers, and the Philadelphia Inquirer in 1972 was hiring young people out of school, had recently been taken over by the Night newspaper chain, and so I had my opportunity to go to Philadelphia.
And it became known for its investigative journalism in the years that followed.
The Inquirer won many Pulitzer Prizes and many awards for journalism, including investigative stories that broke a lot of ground. And it was great training for me. I started out as the transportation writer right out of school, which is a kind of an interesting way to start. And then was sent to the State House to cover state politics in Harrisburg, the state capital, and then from there became the chief political writer. And there I got to cover everything from presidential campaigns to the very colorful then mayor of Philadelphia, a man named Frank Rizzo.
And that led you back into politics and a prosecutor running for governor, right?
That's right, Jeremy. A federal prosecutor named Dick Thornburgh. He was the U.S. attorney in Pittsburgh in western Pennsylvania, and he was compiling quite a record of convicting corrupt public officials. I wrote a story about him because he was shaking up the political establishment. That led to a professional relationship. And when he decided to run for governor in late 1977, he asked if I would join him as his press secretary, and I did that and stayed with him for probably almost 8 years.
And during that 8 years, 3 words, 3 Mile Island.
3 Mile Island was the epic crisis of my career, at least until 9/11. But 3 Mile Island was an accident that occurred at the nuclear power plant just 10 miles down the river from the state capitol. I remember that the governor called me at about 8 in the morning, and I was still in bed. And he said, Critch, he said, there's a site emergency at 3 Mile Island. And I said, Governor, what's 3 Mile Island? And he said, it's the nuclear power plant down the river. Now get your you-know-what out of bed and find out what's going on. And that led to 10 days of very important decisions about whether to evacuate people or not, and a process of trying to find out what was actually going on inside the plant. Remember, this was pre-Chernobyl, and so no one had any experience with a nuclear accident. And so it was a very exciting time. We probably had 500 reporters in town within 3 days.
Find out what's going on. The role of a press secretary, not that different from a journalist.
Not at all. And that was when I must say that I did think back to my days with Dr. Cowden and Warren Franke and Joe McCartney, and was extremely gratified that they had taught me how to dig for facts. And that's what I really ended up doing. I think half my time was spent trying to actually reach sources within the federal government, within the utility that owned the power plant, with experts, and my job became that of a fact gatherer for the governor. And then, of course, I was involved in all the decisions that had to be made, and it was all the skills and training that I had had at UNO, that I think equipped me, for that particular crisis, and many others that would follow.
With a crisis like that, does the phrase "pack journalism" that's been used, is that valid in your opinion?
It was very valid then. I think it is still valid today, even with the change in the technology that we've seen. The slightest rumor in those days would sweep through the media, and at one time we had reports in London tabloids that the Governor Thornburgh had issued orders that looters were to be shot and killed. This, of course, was not true. We didn't have any serious looting, but part of my job then began to be involved in rumor control, and that was to get out in front of the media on a regular basis as the spokesman for the governor and the state, and also to coordinate all of the different state agencies and the federal agencies that came into town to try to deal with the crisis. There's a real kind of lean forward in the trenches mentality when government agents get involved, and you have to also figure out how to coordinate and control all those people all wanting to be part of the action. So yeah, it was at times there was a lot of frightening things that happened. In particular, at one point a rumor went around that the reactor was about to explode, and that would create a China syndrome type meltdown. And I can tell you there was an awful lot involved in finding out if that rumor were true, and then upon determining that it wasn't, getting it kind of quashed in the public media.
And then back to New York, to a large PR firm, Burson Marsteller. You maintain a relationship with Harold Burson today?
I went to New York mostly because my wife, who had worked with me in the governor's office and who had become a journalist herself, wanted to go to Columbia. So that gave me a reason to leave Harrisburg in the middle of the governor's second term. I was lucky enough to get hired by Burson Marsteller, and that's where I met Harold Burson, who's the founder of Burson Marsteller and probably one of the most legendary figures in modern public relations. And as luck would have it, Merrill Lynch was one of Burson's largest clients, and Merrill asked Harold and others if they knew of anybody who might have some political background, because they were looking for a deputy corporate communications director who had some political skills. And I fit the bill, and in 3 months I was working at Merrill, and 28 years later I'm still there.
What is it about Merrill that made you so comfortable to stay for 28 years? Was it your early banking experience or other things?
That's a really wonderful question, Jeremy. Merrill Lynch was an institution with over 100 years of history, known for being bullish on America, known for the bull, which stands for strength, and we tried to make it stand for agility too, but known for its integrity, and it was and known in particular for making the world of investing accessible to the average citizens, people on bringing Wall Street to Main Street. Was our history and our mission. And I've always liked to be part of something, a cause larger than myself. And that was a cause that I could really relate to. And so to promote and advance what Merrill Lynch did for millions and millions of clients, and to defend the company when trouble arose, it was a great honor, a privilege, and a great learning experience for me. And I'm proud to think that I contributed something to the best days of the company.
You wake up one September morning, like any other morning perhaps, and all of a sudden you're in the midst of 9/11.
Yes, that's just about the way it felt. I was sitting at my desk on a glorious fall morning with one other employee. My office window on the executive floor of the company looked right out on the World Trade Towers. I heard a loud boom at about 8:45 in the morning, and simply swiveled around in my chair and saw a huge, fiery, gaping hole in the northernmost of the two towers. And immediately my thoughts were, probably because of my experience as a combat veteran, that this was a hostile act. I thought a missile had hit the towers. And so my job then became to immediately go find the chairman, the president, the head of security, and other relevant people, and make a decision about what to do about the 9,000 people that we had working in my building and another building, both adjacent to the World Trade Center, what became known as Ground Zero after all the buildings collapsed.
Talk about the aftermath of 9/11, what it has left in its wake in terms of Manhattan, in terms of Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, in terms of living in New York City.
It was clearly a very traumatic period for anybody who lived near, the World Trade Center, anybody who lived in the city, anybody who could see the towers, anybody who, and there were many, many people who unfortunately experienced the sight of dozens of people jumping or falling from the buildings. It was a very traumatic time, and I would say that the response of Merrill and our people was just amazing. I mean, we ended up losing 3 people killed who happened to be in the towers at the time. But I think that we, and by we I mean my communications team and Merrill in general, did a very effective job of getting our people evacuated and to safe havens. The company then had to rebuild its buildings. We had to recover from the trauma that many employees felt. Many employees did not want to go back down to that area to work. But I drew a lot of strength from the culture and the values of Merrill, and we felt that we had to get back up and running for the sake of the clients, and in order to send a message to the terrorists that they could not knock us down for long. And that's what we did. And today I think everyone's very mindful of the aftermath. I think we are vigilant. I think people are nicer to each other. A lot of strangers came together on that day, and I think it actually changed the, shall we say, the go-go nature of New York. I also don't want to diminish the trauma that all Americans and all people all around the world felt, because this was broadcast, over and over and over again. And I think the sights of the towers being hit, falling, and the fear and panic that ensued affected millions of people. And so I don't, for a minute, denigrate people feeling something still from what happened now 10 years ago, 11 years ago.
In our closing minutes, we've been through a financial crisis on Wall Street. Public trust was shaken a bit. If you might comment about that, as well as how that informs what you would do in the future, what you want to do that is left undone at this point.
That's a very good question, Jeremy. I think that I believe that Wall Street let the nation down. I think all the financial centers of the world let the world down. I think that like all of history, there are cycles. There are economic booms. There are economic downturns. I think that what we have to constantly try to remember is that in good times, we have to be more vigilant than ever about what we're doing. And I think in this case that we allowed too much risk to pile up in financial holdings, in home mortgages. I think everybody who participated is somewhat complicit, so it is a bigger problem than just Wall Street, but certainly Wall Street could have played a more significant role in policing itself and the trends that they saw building. And instead they opted to let the good times roll and keep making lots of money. And for that I'm very sad. I hope that won't happen again. History suggests that it will, but from where I sit, part of my sense of responsibility would be to try to do whatever I can to make sure that if that's happening, maybe I can help someone pierce the bubble before the bubble breaks itself.
I sense from the visits of our students that you've hosted in New York that you are bullish on the future and bullish on the young people that will inherit the future.
I have been so impressed by the UNO communications students that have come through the last several years. I'm very proud to say that 2 of them have landed significant jobs in major public relations agencies. I think that bodes well for the reputation of the school here. The young people are so they're motivated, they're interested, they're curious, and they bring with them what to me matters so much, which is that they have a sense of humility. You know, they are not. You start off saying kid from Omaha. I'm still a kid from Omaha, and I am just absolutely amazed when I wake up and pinch myself and think about all the things I've been through. And I think being from Omaha and having gone through UNO has really been good at giving me the values not to get too full of myself and not to get arrogant, or at least to try not to get arrogant, and to try to help others. And so I'm very proud of the school. I'm proud to be from it. It's my #1 cause as I approach retirement, and there's really no institution that I care more about.
Paul Critchlow, UNO Communication 2012 Lifetime Achievement Award winner. Congratulations. Thank you. Have a good day.